Quick hello, my name is Ross. I work for Ulster Wildlife. Thank you so much for joining us on this Biodiversity Week for our wonderful talk tonight about the All Ireland Squirrel and Pine Marten survey. We are joined by three fantastic speakers this evening. We have first up Katy Bell, who was speaking about red squirrels from Ulster Wildlife. We have Vicky Knight from the Vincent Wildlife Trust, who will be talking about our pine martens, and Colin Lawton from the University of Galway, who will be talking about the interactions between pine martens and squirrels, which is fantastic. I am going to shut up now and I will let the guys tell you all about these wonderful, precious animals.
Thank you, Ross. Can you guys see that okay? Just let me know before I start. You can see my
Yeah,
presentation? Yeah, perfect. Um, Thank you. You've more energy than me today. Um, so I am Katy Bell. I work as Senior Conservation Officer for Ulster Wildlife. And thank you for listening to us all tonight. So it's really great that we're all collaborating on this All Ireland survey, but Colin's going to talk mostly about the survey, and I'm just going to do a bit of an introduction to red squirrels. I know that some of you on the call will probably know a lot about this, and some of you might not know very much at all about red squirrels, so we'll just give a bit of an introduction. And for those of you that don't know what Ulster Wildlife do, I know that I can recognise a lot of our members there that have joined, so welcome. But yeah, we are a nature conservation charity and we cover Northern Ireland. So we have, that actually says 19 nature reserves. Now we have 20 nature reserves across Northern Ireland. We bring people closer to nature, so we work with communities and young people, and we also save wildlife. So that's kind of where my work comes in. We work on land and at sea, and I manage our terrestrial species projects, and that includes red squirrel and pine marten. Excuse my internet, that might be slightly slow. So we've worked on red squirrel conservation for a number of years, and it's been really interesting because if you want to work in red squirrel conservation, you realize quickly that you also have to work on grey squirrels. And when you're working on these two species, you also realize that you have to work on pine marten. So this is really a three species story, and you cannot really conserve red squirrels without working on all three of these species. So it's a really fascinating project to work on. But I'm going to really focus on this little one here. The red squirrel, the species we have here is the Eurasian red squirrel, and it has a wide range all across the world, across Europe and to Russia. And it's a really interesting species, but it is a woodland specialist. So they are tree dwellers. They really rely on woodland. They are basically built to live in the trees. The gorgeous little thing, so agile running about the woodlands. If you've never got to see one in Ireland, please go and try and find one because they're just wonderful to watch. But they have these fascinating adaptations for running up and down the trees, and they basically help our woodlands to regenerate. So we see that they cache food in the winter, so they don't hibernate, they cache food, and they will actually forget about where a lot of that food is, and then new trees will grow. So they help our woodlands to regenerate. And that means that they're really heavily impacted by woodland loss as well. So we have seen a lot of woodland loss across Ireland, especially our native woodland. So this is a species that is very heavily impacted by that. And most of their food sources come from the woodland. So this is a lovely little picture of all the variety of things that red squirrels eat. So they eat cones and seeds and nuts and shoots and fungi and fruit and bark. There's so many things, but all of this food comes from the woodland. So they really do rely on kind of the food sources in there, also the structure of a woodland. The canopy is really important. We do know that red squirrels can hang out in conifer plantations, but really broadleaf woodland is where they want to be, and that's kind of a healthy ecosystem for them. They have places where they can build drays and nest, and they have places where they can hang out and hibernate. Well, not hibernate, sorry, have little naps when they're not hibernating, when they're sleeping more in the winter, and feel safe and everything. So yeah, a woodland is where they belong. So grey squirrels basically came over to Ireland in 1911. got a little map I'll show you in a second. But these are the two native squirrels that we have here. And a lot of people think that, well, the main difference is one's red and one's grey, but actually their colour varies quite a lot. So red squirrels can be on a spectrum of kind of blonde, grey, all the way to black sometimes. So colour isn't really the main thing. There's a couple of differences here. The ear tufts is one of them. The ear tufts is a main thing that we'll use to distinguish between the two species. That's very important if you see them, say, on a camera trap and you only see a silhouette of them. And quite often you can't see colour. But yeah, reds have ear tufts. They do lose them and they can shed them sometimes, but grey squirrels will never have ear tufts. And then the other thing that grey squirrels have are kind of like a band, this white band around the tail. So those are two distinguishing features. Greys are usually a bit bigger as well. They spend more time on the ground. They're a bit more common in urban areas and things like that. But yeah, but very different, and we love to see our little reds. So Greys basically came over in 1911. They were brought over as a wedding present, a very unfortunate wedding present. So, unfortunately, they were kind of brought over to one of the worst places you could bring them, right in the middle of Ireland. And every grey squirrel that we have now kind of came from that population, which is just crazy. So, yeah, somebody brought them over from Britain, and we just saw red squirrels just decline. I'm sure some of you have seen this map before. So from 1945 here to 2010, we can just see grey squirrels taking over most of England, and a lot of the island of Ireland. And this is for a number of reasons. One, they brought squirrel pox, so this is a disease that grey squirrels carry, but it doesn't affect them. They pass it on to reds. And two, they outcompete them, so for food and things like that in the woodland. So our poor reds were really up against it and kind of pushed to the edges of Ireland. So we had a little look at this. So this last map was 2010. So a big group of us got together, led by the Mammoth Society and the UK Squirrel Accord, to produce a new map. So we pulled together this data for 2017 to 2022. So this is our most recent update. And it was quite fascinating when we looked at this data to show that actually, goodness, Ireland's pretty red now. Now I know Colin's probably going to talk about this a bit more. But reds aren't actually doing too badly now. I'll let him chat about that. But in Northern Ireland, the case is slightly complicated because you've got so many little populations intertwined. But reds are kind of on a landscape scale doing okay. In small little areas, they're still heavily fragmented. Our woodland's heavily fragmented, so they are very much at risk. So woodland connectivity as well as the pressure from greys basically are the main things that kind of are the challenges that red squirrels face. So we in Ulster Wildlife, we be carrying out a survey. So Dave Tosh started this monitoring in 2014 and we took it over in 2017. So we were doing this every year for a while, and now it's up to every 2 years. And basically, we put out camera traps and leave them for 14 days in woodlands. I know maybe some of the people on the call have helped us with this. This is our most recent survey, so we're carrying out the monitoring at the minute. But we have this is the results from the 2024 survey, and in that survey we found red squirrels in 70 different woodlands in Northern Ireland, which is really promising. And they used to kind of be just little fragments in County Fermanagh and County Antrim, but they're definitely spreading out a bit more, which is really interesting. So yeah, they're not doing too badly. They are still very much at risk. We have a lot of source populations of greys, especially in the likes of Belfast and Dublin, and all these greys are kind of basically continuing out, and some of our smaller populations of red are still very much at risk. But it is nice to see, and it's nice to be able to talk about a positive conservation story for a change, because we get a lot of negativity and most of our things are declining. So we are underway for our 2026 survey. Colin's going to talk about this on an all Ireland basis, but we are doing the monitoring in Northern Ireland, which feeds into that. So it's lovely to see. This is actually from the year before, but I always like to share this little pregnant red squirrel because bless her, it's just so lovely when you get proof of reds breeding in a woodland. And this is just one from 2 days ago when I was checking cameras from Fermanagh. So, and this was actually an area that had been previously failed and the woodland was down to about half the size, and we were very worried that the reds had gone, but they're still there hanging on and very much appreciating the snacks I gave them. So yeah, we're really intrigued to see what's going to happen this year. There's been a lot of felling. There's a lot of storms last year, and there's been a lot of felling in Northern Ireland, in areas that have red squirrels. So we're a little bit nervous about what's going on with them, but we'll hopefully find out at the end of this year. So we just wanted to shout out to the Red Squirrel volunteers in Northern Ireland. They have helped a lot with our survey, and there are 14 different volunteer groups across the country, which is just amazing. So many people dedicating their time and really keen on helping red squirrels in their local area. So yeah, we couldn't do this monitoring without them. And yeah, they do a lot of work and they're always in need of help. So if anyone is interested in joining a red squirrel group, we'll put the link to all of the groups in the chat. Everything we kind of do is kind of underpinned by our red squirrel strategy. So we wrote Red Squirrel Strategy for Northern Ireland, and that was published in 2022. So really, this is kind of the body of all of the work that we do. We are trying to make sure red squirrels are remaining where they should be. We'd really love to see red squirrel recovery across their former range across Northern Ireland and beyond, and a lot about grey squirrel management and with the support of pine marten recovery, which other two are going to talk about, and also appropriate habitat management to aid red squirrel conservation. So that's kind of the body of everything we're kind of trying to do, and how our work supports that. And I just wanted to finish with this lovely little red, if it's going to play. Is that playing? Is that playing? Is it? Yeah. It's not playing on my end, but hopefully it's playing for you guys. This is a little red squirrel from one of our nature reserves in Glenarm, and we have a number of nature reserves, 3 nature reserves now, where red squirrels are present, so that's really nice, and we get to monitor our lovely little populations of reds.
Unfortunately, that's not playing, Katie.
Oh,
There
is it
might be
not?
a wee play button at the bottom of the
Oh,
screen
there.
that's
Yeah.
there.
It wasn't popping up for me. Is it playing now?
That's you now.
The sound was going. The video wasn't playing. Not too bad, but yeah. Little cutie pie. I just let you enjoy that little mindful moment of a little red squirrel hanging out in a nice woodland. So yeah, there you go. Um, and yeah, just a shout out to that we really want records through for the All Ireland survey, which we'll be hounding you all for at the end, basically. So that is my very swift introduction to red squirrels.
Brilliant. Thanks, Key. My turn. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yep, you're all
Yeah.
good.
Perfect. So I'm just working out my sharing screen. Can you see that?
Yep, looking good.
Brilliant. Hold on a sec. Cool. Right. So, hello everyone. My name is Vicky Knight, and I am the Species Conservation Officer for Vincent Wildlife Trust, based over here in Ireland. So, the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to be talking all about the pine marten. So, giving you a quick introduction on the species. But before we start, I'll just introduce Vincent Wildlife Trust. So, we are a charity specialising in mammal conservation and research. Our mission is to conserve threatened mammals by leading the way with scientifically sound conservation work. And Vincent Wildlife Trust mainly works with threatened carnivores and also bat species. So here in Ireland, our work focuses on 3 species, which are photographed here. So the lesser horseshoe bat, your Irish stoat, and also the pine marten. So our work with the pine marten consists of improving pine marten and human coexistence. So unfortunately, I don't have much time to go into this work, but if you do want to find out more about it, do visit our website, which is vincentwildlifetrust.ie. Cool. So straight into the pine marten. So the history in an Irish context. So the Gaelic name for pine marten, do excuse my pronunciation, but I think it's pronounced Coscran, which means tree cat. So that's a really, really good um, description of our pine marten. So it's a species that's very commonly found up in trees. So there's evidence of the pine marten on the island of Ireland for as long as 2,800 years long, but they could have been here much longer. So during this time, 2,800 years ago, Ireland would have looked very, very differently. So there would have been vast woodlands, and this is the sort of habitat that our pine martens would have thrived in. So it's likely that they were introduced by early humans for their economic values, such as their highly valued pelt, or even as a food source. So it's not known exactly when or how the pine marten got here, but there has been genetic studies done, and it shows similarities between populations in Iberia and also southern Europe. So although the pine marten is believed to have been introduced by humans, it is classified as a native species by the IUCN list, red list, because it was introduced before 1500 AD. So we'll fast forward a little bit to the 1980s. The pine marten was on the brink of extinction here in Ireland, and there's a few different reasons for that. So there was mass deforestation, overhunting for the fur trade, poisoning, and also persecution. But now, luckily, we have legal protection on the species. There was a ban on strychnine poisoning in the 1990s, which also massively helped. And the increase of forestry has provided a more suitable environment for the return of the species. So they're now found in every county across the island. So in terms of distribution, they're not just found here in Ireland, they're found throughout Western Europe, to Western Siberia, and also down southward towards Iran, Iraq, and Syria. So it is a protected species both internationally and nationally, both in the Republic and Northern Ireland. So it is an offence except under licence to capture or kill a pine marten or destroy or disturb their resting places. So in the Republic of Ireland, the latest Article 17 report, which assesses all the protected habitats and species found here, lists the conservation status of the pine marten as favourable, and it's also listed as least concern on our IUCN red list. So it's looking much better than it was in the 1980s. The pine marten is Martes martes. It's nice and easy for me. And they're part of the Mustelidae family, or also known as the weasel family. And this is the biggest species across the world. Here in Ireland, we just have 6 species of mustelids. So photographed here or illustrated is our 4 small mustelids. So that includes our native Irish stoat, our non-native invasive American mink, non-native ferret, and also our pine marten. So the 2 missing are the larger species, so our badger and also our otter. So mustelids have a few things in common usually. So they have a long, slender body, which all these 4 definitely have. They tend to have short legs. However, the pine marten has slightly longer legs, so it can climb trees much better. They have a bounding movement. So anyone that's seen a mustelid running will know exactly what I'm on about. They almost flow and wave as they're moving. They tend to have small, rounded ears, a long, flattened head, and all mustelids have 5 toes on all their feet. They also have well-developed anal scent glands. So these are used for communication, territory marking, and also defence. So the 4 species on your left-hand side are our small mustelids here in Ireland, and they're the ones that are most commonly confused. So I'm just going to point out some different features that helps identify them. So Your pine marten is about the size of a domestic cat. Males are a little bit bigger than your females, so they can weigh up to 2 kilograms, and then your females 1.5 kilograms. So the other three species are a little bit smaller. The Irish stoat is much, much smaller, so it's about the same size as a rat. So really is a lot smaller than your pine marten. Then if we look at the colours and the markings, your pine marten is a nice deep dark chocolate colour, and it has an apricot bib on the front of its chest. The mink is very, very dark brown, almost black looking, and it might have a white chin and some white markings on its chest. And then your Irish stoat, it has that very, very distinctive black tip to the tail, and the white runs the whole way down its body underneath. So yeah, the pine marten also has that really bushy tail. Your pine marten is usually found in woodlands, and then the mink is usually found near water body. So each pine marten has a unique bib pattern, as shown in this illustration. So much like a human footprint, it can be used to identify individuals. So if you do have any trail cameras out, do look at that bib pattern and see if you're getting more than one individual turning up. So adaptations evolved to occupy a semi-arboreal or tree-dwelling niche, and they have specific adaptations which enable them to live in a woodland environment. So these videos will really showcase that. So these features include the long, powerful forelimbs with strong climbing muscles and relatively large feet. Like squirrels, martens have ankles that can rotate up to 180 degrees, allowing them to keep all 4 feet securely attached when climbing down trees head first. They also have a long bushy tail that provides balance while leaping and running across narrow branches. Can you tell I've practiced this with the videos? And finally, each of the 5 toes end with a curved claw that helps them grip onto the bark. So they really, really are very well adapted for living up in trees. Oh, there you go. Right, so pine martens, as I've already established, are a woodland specialist. However, they do use a mixture of different habitats. So this includes scrubland, where pine martens rest, they sleep, and they also raise their kits. So dense sites can include squirrel drays, birds' nests, rocky cairns, also roofs of buildings, and all of these provide, the protection that they need. However, cavities in old trees are the preferred den site for pine martens, but these are often missing from Ireland's most common woodlands, which are conifer plantations. And also, these old cavities can take hundreds of years to develop in these trees. So something that Vincent Wildlife Trust has been working on is providing alternative den sites called den boxes. So these replicate tree cavities to provide a safe and sheltered place for pine martens to rest, to overwinter, and also to raise their young. So you would have seen in the videos that I was showing before, the pine martens using these den boxes. So while we're waiting for the trees to get to an older age to have those cavities, these den boxes kind of bridge that time gap while we're waiting for that. So there has recently been new guidance published on how to build and how to install a pine marten den box. So there's a QR code up there, and this has been published by our Martens on the Move project in Britain, so a Vincent Wildlife Trust project over there. So if you would like any more information, do use the QR codes and get them downloaded. But otherwise, you can visit their website, which is pinemartens.uk. So in terms of diet, although they are a carnivore, pine martens do have a very varied diet, eating both animal and plant material. So this includes small mammals, birds, eggs, amphibians, invertebrates, fruits and berries, fungi, and also carrion. So we've got a lovely video here of a pine marten feeding on bilberries. So they tend to eat what is plentiful locally, playing an important role on maintaining a healthy balance of flora and fauna across their range. And then we go into territories. So adults are territorial and solitary animals. So if you do see more than one pine marten, it does usually tend to be mothers and kits. However, you can get some subadults that are siblings that might hang out together. And then if you see two in the summer, it could be a male and female coming together to mate. So the average home range or territory varies depending on habitat quality. So average home range is between 1 and 10 kilometres usually, but this can be up to 56 kilometres. So Irish pine marten home ranges are typically smaller than those in Europe and Britain, which is thought to be because of the humid and mild conditions. So providing more food into the winter, and the lack of competition from other carnivores might be another reason for that. So males maintain a significantly larger territory than a female, and this may be because they're bigger than females, so they need more food, but also male territories often overlap with females, so it could increase their mating potential. Boundaries are marked using scats deposited in prominent locations. So scats or droppings can be found directly in the middle of forest trails, as this photo shows, on fallen logs, for example, or prominent boulders, and they're often left in the same places to mark their territory. So I hope none of you are eating your dinner tonight, but this photo here is a photo of the different sorts of scats. So that's taken from Johnny Burke's Pine Marten book. But as mentioned before, their diet can vary from season and habitat, so their droppings can present very differently. So my last slide, the pine marten year. So pine martens are actually considered a slow breeding species. They don't become sexually active until 2 or 3 years old, and they are lucky to live past 5 years old in the wild. So when they reach sexual maturity, a female will give birth to kits once every year or every 2 years. So pregnant females select natal dens in February and March time. And if she still has kits hanging on from last year, this is the time when she's kicking them out. So March, April, the female will give birth to kits. It tends to be typically 1 or 2 kits, and they are born blind and hairless, and they stay in their dens for 6 weeks. So very, very dependent on their mother. Kits begin to accompany their mothers in late May, June or July. And then in June, July and August, the mating will happen. So adult males and females will come together to mate. The female uses delayed implantation until the following February. And this is a survival mechanism which ensures kits are born during the most favourable time of year. So this is usually March and April. We then get into the winter months, so less time is spent out foraging. They don't actually hibernate, and they're spending more time in their dens resting. And this is also the time that juveniles tend to disperse and find their own territories. So that's it from me. Thank you for listening, and I'll hand you over to Colin. I've just got to work out how to stop sharing. Oh, there we go.
I have now to work out how to share. So thanks very much, Vicky. Hold on, hopefully get this right. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah, it looks well, Colin.
Right, that's great. Thanks. It's great to be here, and it's great to have so many people joining us. So thanks very much for that. My name's Colin Lawton. I'm a lecturer here in the University of Galway in zoology, and I've been working on squirrels in particular for the last 30 years. I started my PhD in 1996, so it's a bit of an anniversary, and I worked on grey squirrels at first, and it was a very different picture back then. So what I'm going to do is take you through a whole series of maps, really, to show how things have changed for the three species um, over the last 30 years, and to look at where we are now and what we're trying to do with our current survey. So some of this you may have already heard, particularly from Katy earlier, but just to recap, our red squirrel then is a native species in Ireland. They, like Vicky mentioned with the pine marten, we're a bit unsure of their origins, exactly how they got onto the island. The first record of them is as early as 655 AD, and they were probably here from as long ago as the last ice age. They disappeared from the country almost completely in the 1600s. We had a terrible problem with deforestation at the time. Ireland's forest cover dropped down to about 1%, partly because the timber was being taken to use for the British Navy, but also to clear the land for agriculture. And so as a result, whatever the problems that grey squirrels cause for red squirrels, it's nothing compared to the lack of habitat. If there are no woodlands, there are no squirrels. So when the woodland dropped to about that amount, that was it basically for the red squirrel. So our current population is nearly all comes from introductions that happened in the 1800s. There were about 10 of them, red squirrels being brought over from Britain. There may be a possible remnant population. Genetic studies suggest that some of the ones in the southwest may come from the original Irish red squirrels. But anyway, to cut a long story short, we generally consider them part of our native fauna. So life wasn't all that easy for red squirrels. And then, as we heard earlier, they suddenly had this new challenge, and that was the grey squirrel being brought in that one-off introduction in 1911. And they were brought in to a place here in County Longford. And over the next sort of 50 years, there was a very slow, it takes animals a long time to become established and then start to spread. So it was over the next 50, 60, 70 years that this spread of the grey squirrel started to be noted. And there were a few surveys carried out by the National Parks and Wildlife Service that are highlighted here in green. And the very first sort of the modern surveys, if you like, was done in a collaboration between Queen's University and Trinity. And that's this 1997 distribution of the grey squirrel that we had at the time. They never moved to the west of Ireland. The pathway was blocked partially by the River Shannon, but mainly because of the poor habitat to the west of Ireland. There isn't much in the way of forestry. The connectivity is very poor, lots of blanket bogs. So it was generally the eastern half of Ireland they were found. They had an impact on the red squirrel. So this is from our the first of the series of surveys that I've been involved in of our squirrel species was done in 2007. And we look at their distribution according to what we call hectads, which are 10 by 10 kilometer squares in Ireland, although they're shown up as dots here. But so at that time, the grey squirrel had continued to spread, found throughout Northern Ireland, pushing into Donegal, all the way down into Wexford, pushing into Waterford and Cork. The eastern half of Ireland almost completely covered in grey squirrels. And our red squirrels were still widespread, but it was quite patchy. And in particular, in the middle of the country, the place where the grey squirrels had longest been established, we had this large gap. And at that time, it didn't look good for the red squirrel in Ireland. I'll just put this picture up mainly to break up some of the maps, but our little red squirrels were in a bit of trouble. It looked like it was a one-way story that eventually the grey squirrels were going to take over and the red squirrels were going to disappear. So moving forward to our next survey, which was carried out in 2012, and we had started to notice something actually going back even to 2007, that there were certain gaps that didn't really make sense to us. Here you can see sort of Cavan Monaghan, Leash Offaly. There were certain places where the grey squirrel didn't seem to be doing as well as we'd have expected. And when we looked in 2012, we found that there was an incredible crash in their population in the Midlands. So I mentioned the hectads, the very unscientific unit of measurement we use in Ireland is county. And we have this 6-county area in the Midlands where the grey squirrel had almost disappeared. And this is the area you'll remember that the grey squirrel has been longest established in, and there are fantastic habitat for them there. So a lot of that didn't make sense until you compared their distribution in 2012 with another species, and that was the pine marten. So we had already put these two together going back as far as 2007. Emma Sheehy, who I think actually might be in the audience there, was working on this in our group at the time as well. And we saw that we had the pine marten had this core area that spread across the Midlands where they were doing particularly well. So since they'd become protected, as we heard from Vicky in the 1970s, the pine marten had started to spread again after almost disappearing from the country. And they're found throughout all the counties of Ireland, but particularly in the Midlands, we had very high densities of them. And this pine marten distribution was almost a complete negative of what we see with the grey squirrel. So where the pine martens are found, grey squirrels didn't seem to be found. When we compare that with our red squirrel, again in 2012, they still looked quite they were still widespread. There were still some gaps, but there were certain areas where it looked like they'd made a bit of a recovery. And again, we didn't see the same impact from the pine marten that we saw on the grey squirrel. So red squirrels seem to be quite happy to live in the same forests as the pine marten, where the grey squirrel wasn't able to. So I'm jumping ahead again, and we're moving to the third of our surveys, which was carried out in 2019. So this was a 7-year jump, and once again, we were looking at all 3 species. And so I'm going to take you through one at a time. We'll start with the red squirrel. And so in 2019, we saw that this recovery that were hoping that we saw signs of in 2012 had really continued. And we got records of red squirrels, again, in every county in Ireland. There was just 1 or 2 in Meath for some reason, was holding out. But there was a considerable recovery in this Midland area where the grey squirrel had disappeared. So it had taken a bit of time. There's a bit of a lag period, but once the grey squirrel was no longer there, competing with the red squirrel and giving them squirrel pox virus, the red squirrels were able to recover. And again, this is the area where we'd found lots of pine martens as well. When we look at the grey squirrel, our 6-county gap that we had seen in 2012 was now a 10-county gap. In fact, there was such a large area where grey squirrels had disappeared that it seems that the grey squirrel was mainly being found in 2 big clusters around our our large urban cities of Belfast and Dublin. There's still quite a few of them across Northern Ireland, although they had disappeared, for example, from Fermanagh. But we did see certain areas that were still a bit of a area of concern. They continued to spread into the southwest, and they were even pushing on into Donegal and so on. So they're still an invasive species, and also there are these massive pools of them found in the urban areas, so they weren't disappearing for good. But certainly whatever had been started to appear in 2007 and then was really rearing its head in 2012 had continued to quite a considerable extent in 2019. Pine marten then had continued its recovery from its earlier problems, and that core area that I mentioned had spread as well. And once again, we had this incredible negative correlation between the pine martens and the grey squirrels. So the pine marten, as it continued to push across the country in higher and higher numbers, were continuing to have this impact on the greys. To just put a few numbers on this, then we were just comparing our 3 surveys and looking at those hectads, those 10 by 10K dots, to see how they had changed over across those various surveys that we'd done. And so the pine martens, there were over 3 times as many pine martens, or 10 by 10k square, across the island of Ireland. 3 times as many were being recorded as positive for pine martens. Red squirrels, their range had increased by 52% when we look again at those hectads. And then we saw that the grey squirrel had decreased by 41%. So part of the increase may be that we're becoming better at our surveys. We're getting more and more people to let us know where the animals are found. But that wasn't seen across all 3 species. The grey squirrel had gone in the other direction. So there's a real crash in the numbers of a species that, as I said, 30 years ago when I started, was considered as this invasive species that was going to take over and be our only squirrel species going forward. It's even more exaggerated, this impact on the grey squirrels, when we look at those squares where they were found previously with pine marten, and grey squirrels had disappeared from those areas across 85% of those squares. So further work has been done on this, as well as looking at the ranges. Emma, who I mentioned, has done some fantastic work over in Scotland. Josh Twining, who was working up in Queens, and ourselves down in the south here, had all been looking at various different aspects of this. And we're fairly sure that what's going on now is a predator naivety being shown by the grey squirrels. So we weren't sure at the start whether this was some sort of a behavioral aspect, that the pine marten were freaking out the grey squirrels and they were sort of not behaving normally. But actually, it's the complete opposite. It seems to be that they just don't recognize the pine marten as a danger. They are leaving themselves prone to being attacked by being very close to tree trunks, being on the ground, whereas the red squirrels are quite wary of pine martens, and so keep a healthy distance, are ready to run away if pine martens come close, and as a result, they're able to live alongside them in the same habitats. Grey squirrels disappear quite quickly because they're being eaten. So to bring us on then, and to sort of start to wrap up, you'll see that the previous surveys were kind of done every 6-7 years. So we decided it was time to look again and see how this story is continuing. And so we've just launched our latest survey back in January. We put out a press release. Ourselves, Ulster Wildlife, the Vincent Wildlife Trust are all working together on this. We managed to just pick a very good week. So we got quite a lot of publicity. We radio and TV and news items about it. And so we've been getting the word out. So these are citizen science surveys that we're basically getting as many records as we can from just the general public. People know exactly what species are in their local woodlands. And we're trying to bring all that information together in order to be able to build these maps that tell us so much about these wildlife species. So our data is collected by the National Biodiversity Data Centre, which is down in the southeast of the Republic of Ireland, and by CEDAR, which is based up in Northern Ireland, and Ulster Wildlife collect the records as well. And we were able to bring them all together and, as I say, create the maps. We'd really urge everybody on the call today to let us know where your species are. We actually really want to hear where grey squirrels are seen. The concern sometimes is that the invasive species that people see every day in their parks, we hear about them less, whereas people are more keen to tell us about the lovely native species that they see only occasionally. We also are on Instagram. That's Vicky's working away on that. So it's one of the easiest ways to make a record. You can just link in there. So you can find us on Instagram, and we try and keep updated there, and we'll start to feed some results in as we go. But just up to the end of April, these are the records we've got in again. So we've done really, really well. We've nearly 1,000 records of red squirrels already. If that continues, we're going to blow the previous surveys out of the water completely. Pine marten records are doing quite well as well, and it seems that the grey squirrel is still quite low, which is fantastic news. But we have to wait until we get all our records in. We have to validate the records, make sure that they're all correct, and so on. Those records at the top there just show from the National Biodiversity Data Centre. We have to add in the records from Northern Ireland. There's another 565 from there as well. And the Biodiversity Data Centre told me that the red squirrel is their most recorded species this year so far. So it's taken the lead out of all species across plants and animals, which is just fantastic to hear about. So I'll finish there. Those are the two links again. And thanks for your attention. And yeah, answer any questions that anybody might have.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Colin. And thank you very much to Vicky and Katie as well. Three fantastic. We I can answer it if you want.
Oh, sorry, my computer just froze. Was that something for me? My sound's just come back and it completely gone. Start again.
It was teed up for you, but let's go again.
Sorry.
How to safely get good quality pictures of red squirrels using trail cameras, Katie?
Oh. Oh, you can definitely answer that one as well. Um, I suppose safely, as in keeping the red squirrel safe. Is that what you mean? Um, I suppose, yeah. I mean, usually we use feeders. So we wouldn't advise putting up feeders in areas that also have greys. So if you know there's an area that have reds, getting a feeder up or putting up a little feeding station. So leaving some food, some peanuts or something out somewhere. Kind of don't do that regularly. And also if you're putting out feeders, there's lots about like hygiene, don't leave it out. But if you just want to see if there's a red squirrel around, leaving a little feeding station and setting up a camera somewhere with a lock on it, depending on your woodland. And usually red squirrels turn up reasonably quickly. We do get them find. They find a food source, they find feeders quite quickly. Sometimes it takes pine martens a lot longer to find them, but yeah, and camera traps are just getting so much better. So there's so many good ones out there that aren't too expensive now. Um, so yeah.
Grant, thank you very much. Um, Alison has asked, could you talk more about the impact of clear felling on red squirrels, at the time of the felling as well as after felling?
Do you want me to come in on that?
Yeah, go for it. I
Yeah,
was just going to say one thing. Just yeah, it very much depends on the forestry operations and how it's done. Really, it can have great impact, not much impact. And just to mention, we're actually working on. There is no felling guidance for red squirrels for Northern Ireland. We're working on that at the minute, actually, with NIA and the Woodland Trust. Because at the minute they use Scottish guidance, which is fine, but it's not local enough. So we are working on that because yeah, they can be heavily impacted. Sorry, Colin, you go ahead.
no, I was just going to say the actual clear felling itself would probably not have too much of an impact on red squirrels because they'd hear them coming a mile away. But what it would do is they'd run off and they'd be more likely to be um, injured on roads or something as they leave. The real impact on them. I mean, I work on a from a population perspective, so rather than what the impact is on individuals, and the real impact is just the loss of habitat has a direct impact on the numbers of squirrels that are going to be found in an area, and ultimately you cut down half a woodland, you're going to have half as many squirrels left. But also if you fragment the habitat, and so um, the stands that survive are left sort of fractured and with big sort of gaps between them, you can end up having further impacts on the population. So you get this sort of exacerbated problem. So we were always looking for continuous canopy cover, we call it, which is basically that even if you're thinning trees, you're leaving some canopy available for the squirrels to be able to move from one area to another.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Colin. Um, Another question from Alison. Are the red squirrels able to avoid predation due to being light enough to escape on the thinner branches that the pine martens cannot access?
I mean, there's lots. That was an original theory, wasn't it? I mean, they're definitely more agile. Red squirrels have evolved with pine martens, so that they're very vigilant to them. You can see that. The two of them coexist very well. Reds do get predated. Pine martens do eat reds sometimes. They can catch them, but for the most part, from a lot of what we know about pine martens, is they're pretty lazy, and they actually don't go out of their way to chase things down. Greys are much easier to catch, but they just much the same eat something that was right in front of them. So berries or something else that's right in front of them, they're going to eat that rather than chasing something down. Um so
Yeah,
yeah.
and even though we've been talking about the pine martens as an arboreal predator, gray squirrels spend a lot more time on the ground than red squirrels do, and that's where they're most prone to being actually captured. So it's kind of a combination of all these things. But as Katie says, I think they're just too much like hard work to actually catch. So unless a pine marten gets one unawares, it's just going to let it go, and that's because they know in these fine branches maybe they're just not going to be able to get them.
Great, thank you very much. Um, Eric is asking the big question this evening. I'm seeing loads of cheeky grey squirrels in Dublin parks, but no red squirrels. Will I ever see red squirrels in Dublin?
They were there before. I mean, Anne's Park is a great example, a place where we had red squirrels and then the grey squirrels took over from them. The, the problem is that we're not going to see the pine martens having the same effect in urban areas as we see in the sort of rural woodlands. So, with the best will in the world, we're not going to get rid of grey squirrels altogether. And so, red squirrels are still going to have this problem in these more urban areas. It's possible that they could make their way back, but I think it's very unlikely. And I think grey squirrels are going to be there to stay for a while in Dublin and Belfast unless some other sort of control or something is carried out on them.
I
Yeah.
have here in the chat, Emma Sheehy has responded to Eric saying there's a feasibility study taking place at the moment looking at landscape scale grey squirrel control in Dublin and East Wicklow. Keep an ear out for the public survey, which starts in June. So that's
Thank you,
very
Emma.
exciting news to hear.
Yeah, I didn't know if I was allowed to say that, so thank you, Emma, for spilling on that. It's also just worth mentioning there that it's different and it's a different landscape, but they have just achieved a full eradication of grey squirrels from Aberdeen in Scotland, and that was a removal of 10,000 grey squirrels. So like it can be done. It's just it takes a lot of money and a lot of people willing to do it. So it wouldn't be an easy challenge. But yeah, Emma's hopefully going to find out how big that challenge actually is.
And as shown from Colin's maps that big cities are the where the grey population seems to dominate. So if we can make a dent in those, for the proximity of reds, I, I'm not too sure about that. Whilst our speakers are answering, unless anyone wants to hop on. No. Okay.
I've frozen
Yes.
again, Ross.
So
Sorry, I missed the
you may
question.
move your kids.
Sorry, I'm
Oh,
delayed. I keep freezing every
oh
time.
dear, your internet is not
It's not, sorry.
being kind to you. Is there a set buffer zone for the proximity of red squirrels to a wind farm?
No idea.
And we've
I
lost
take
Katie.
it no one I take it no one no, I've turned my
No
video off.
idea.
I've
Okay.
turned my video off so that I might be able to hear you next time. I take it nobody no, I'm not sure. I don't think so.
There doesn't seem to be, at least down south here, there doesn't seem to be any specific legislation about it. You know, protecting red squirrels or so on. Quite often I'd get asked about, people would be concerned because a local woodland is being cut down and they're concerned about the red squirrels. But unlike, say, bats and otters, maybe, the red squirrel doesn't really have that much sway on its own, and so I don't think there is a specific sort of buffer zone that's mandated.
No,
Appreciate that,
no
Colin.
thanks.
Thank you. I have a question here I think it might be best posed for Vicky. From Andrew. I live in a farming area and there isn't much woodland around, but plenty of scrub and hedgerows. I know there are some pine marten in the area. Is there anything I could be doing to help promote their growth?
Good question. So a good thing to start doing is planting trees so they have habitat in the future, but it does sound like they've probably found a building or something to den in. And if they are about, they're definitely getting plenty of food. So making sure you're planting your native species that produce berries, for example, increase invertebrate numbers, and leaving areas to go wild so they have more food to eat is a good place to start.
Absolutely. Wonderful answer. Um, I would also add on to that, Vicky, maybe looking at the management of the hedgerows and making sure that hedgerows are being cut in alternate years, so there's plenty of flower growth, plenty of berries on the hedgerows on the trees, so there's lots of food available for animals, not just for the pine marten, but for everything as well. Is this another pine marten question? I think it is. Kate is asking, did the expansion of pine marten occur due to better recording, availability of prey, or for some other reason?
We believe that it's basically that once the protection came in and they were no longer being sort of persecuted and habitat was returning and so on. It's just a gradual response to that. They're a very slow breeding species, so it's taken a long time. I mentioned when I was talking about gray squirrels that when they were first brought in, they had to become a
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Colin. I did have another question and I've now lost it. So many coming into the chat here. It's fantastic.
There was a question,
Does anyone have any
I'm
thoughts?
sorry.
Sorry, go on, Katie.
No, I think you were going to say that about the pine marten sightings in Belfast.
Yes.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, Ross would monitor all the sightings come in, and we are seeing quite a few come in from Belfast, which is really interesting. But they're also popping up in a lot of urban areas. So in the last year or so, we've seen quite a lot turn up in urban gardens, which is great. There's a lot of areas we would expect them, but Belfast to Lisburn, this just shows kind of. Well, first of all, pine martens move a lot, so they do have quite a big range, but also that they are spreading across the country. So I don't know if there's enough places in Belfast for them to really establish and enough, woodland cover and things for them to be denning in. So it's more than likely that they're just moving through, but only time will tell, really.
Indeed. Is there any other questions to come in? I think almost all of them be covered. A lot of people have said their goodbyes. If there's no other questions coming in, I think we will call it there. Um, Thank you very much, everyone, for coming in and listening. Thanks so much for asking your questions. Please, please, please do report your sightings of red squirrels, grey squirrels, and pine martens all across the island of Ireland this year. As everyone's talked about already, this survey is going to be a big one. I want to I want to see more sightings come through, and it's especially in your local park someone else will record that. Sure, that sighting logged, because those are the ones that we also need. Because an example is last year, a local campaign report grey squirrels because we hadn't had a grey squirrel from the town of Dungannon for over 4 years, and within a day we'd received 30 sightings from that week. So we thought that there was no grey squirrels left in the town of Dungannon, but actually they were there. It's just people weren't reporting them. So please do report your grey squirrels. It's really important that we are able to look at the minutiae of their distribution across the island of Ireland. Thanks so much, everyone, and thank you so much to our speakers. So wonderful talks this evening. Have a lovely rest of your week.